Our next speaker, Jennifer Stein, lives in Radnor, a suburb of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Textiles from the University of Arizona and has been an artist and an entrepreneur all her life. She has held national leadership roles in Jewish women's organizations and currently sits on the board of Ceasefire PA, promoting legislation which promotes legislative recommendations for sensible gun ownership. She made a living as a clothing designer, working her way through college, and after, she founded her own special events coordination business. Since 2005, Jennifer has been making documentary films and volunteering her time to MUFON and the Institute for Noetic Sciences. Jennifer was an invaluable colleague of the late Zecharia Sitchin and traveled with him throughout the Middle East. In 2002, she founded Mainline MUFON, which hosts free monthly programs at a wonderful public library, which provides interesting speakers and film presentations year-round. This program is now entering its 11th year and is one of the finest ongoing MUFON-associated programs in the country. Jennifer is committed to opening up the conversation about the UFO topic in border communities, which is reflected in her Emmy-winning award documentary, It Could Happen Tomorrow, co-produced with Ron James. She is happily married to a lifetime partner who she claims is her greatest teacher, and is the mother of two remarkable young adult daughters who are her second greatest teachers. I know them all, and I can testify that that is true. Would you say your cats are the third?
And my husband.
Oh, he's first. Jennifer most often speaks about crop circles, and last year we spoke together in England, where this topic is owned. And Jennifer's talk drew the closest thing I've ever seen to a standing ovation at a UFO conference. However, today, for the first time, in a public forum like this, she will share her own UFO event that happened in 1975 and the effect of it has had on her life and does to all of us here. I'd also like to add that Jennifer is one of my closest colleagues, one of my dearest friends, one of the greatest secret weapons in ufology. And I want to thank her for accepting our invitation to speak here today, and for her courage in coming forward to share a personal account. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Jennifer Stein.
I think that's good. Thank you for moving the mic for me. Well, thank you, Peter, Peter really knows how to give an introduction, and Peter is a mentor of mine. I also have a lot of affection for Peter and feel really honored to call him friend, and I'm really honored and humbled to be able to come and present today. Many of you in the room are experiencers, so I know I'm speaking to the choir. And many of you have had terrifying experiences, which I'm also humbled by. As you will hear throughout my presentation, I do not actually believe that I had an abduction experience, but I did have some unusual experience that deeply affected my consciousness, and I think it affected why I'm doing what I do today. And I'll try to unfold my story for you in the chronological way in which it unfolded for me over a period of about 35 years of realization. And hopefully you'll be able to follow along with me. I've created I'm trying to get closer to my computer so I can switch forward. I've created a group of photos for you to kind of follow along in the story. This, of course, is my family. Some of my pictures are slides that have been digitized, so they're not really quite clear. That's why this is fuzzy. But this is, of course, me in the Brownie uniform here. And this is about 1962. I was born in 1955. When I was born, my father was 50. My mother was about 35. She was about 15 years younger than my dad. For my mother, it was her first marriage. For my dad, it was a second marriage. His first wife had committed suicide and left him with a son to raise. So when my parents got married, that son was about 7 years old. They promptly got married, had my sister Stephanie. They were 8 years apart, and I was born 8 years later. So it was a very unusual family. We were all 8 years apart. I used to think gestation was 8 years. Now, this is a picture of my parents, my father, Gert, and my mother, Louise. My father was basically a self-trained architect. He had been through architecture school but never graduated. He worked as a draftsman. He actually worked under Frank Lloyd Wright and was very influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright in Chicago in the late 30s, very early 40s. And my parents were martini drinking, very artistic sort of snobs about style, as you can see from this picture. And they brought me up with a great appreciation for art and style. My father built this very modern, rustic home in the northern suburbs of Philadelphia. In fact, last Sunday, it's a side note, but I was reading the New York Times and I saw that Calvin Klein, I think, had finally finished a very austere, ultra-modern mansion on the Hamptons. And I looked at the picture and I went, oh, that looks like my parents' house. Although, of course, we had a very simple house, but it was very austere, very modern. One of the things we had is these floor-to-ceiling panels of windows, glass windows, that were wooden panels. And my parents also built and designed all their own furniture. They built those banquettes, sort of like IKEA furniture before that existed. And my mother made the cushions and the slipcovers, and here they are making modern art for their modern home. This was when they were building the house. I'm describing this to you so you make sense of my pictures, and so you see the placement of the house. It was set into a hillside. This was the front entrance, and the front entrance had a stairway up and a stairway down. And then and this is the front entrance finished. So you can see there were floor-to-ceiling windows. This was the front of the house, and there were drapes there. But in the back of the house, they were floor-to-ceiling, and it was 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling windows. So the house was set into an L in a hill, and we overlooked Mennonite farmland. The house was finished in about 1950. That was the front of it. This is a slide picture of the back of the house. They added this porch and carport, and then the back of the house was back here. I'll show you some more pictures of it. This is a picture today. I actually went back to the house to meet the owner. The owner bought the property from my parents. It's still the same owner, and we're friendly. She let me come back and take a lot of pictures of the house. This side of the house is what will be important in the story later. We overlooked about, we could see about 4 or 5 acres of Mennonite farmland, and we had 7 acres that was farmland and, not farmland, it was a rocky hill and a meadow. It was unfarmable, which is why the farmers unloaded it on us, and it was heavily forested. I'll just walk you around the house so you get a little bit of a sense of it. That was a carport that we built. It was a new room we built, but it was been altered. They stuccoed it since we left. This is the back side of the house, which becomes important in my story. It had cinder blocks on the east and west, and it had these angled roofs. It was sort of like a butterfly roof, so there was lots of natural light that poured in, and we could see outside all day long. It was almost like we were outside. This is a picture of them building the back of the house. That's my mother standing there. And that's the bedroom area upstairs, and then the lower level had the same windows, floor to ceiling. This is when the house was finished in about 1957. Notice that there's a balcony right here. There was balconies outside the bedroom windows. And this is me. I'm about 2 years old, and that's my father. So you can see the extreme age difference. Basically my dad was almost the same. Yeah, I know, but if the mic was here, it'd be easier because I can't turn and see the screen. I don't think we have the room to move the mic, but I'll do my best.
In fact, can I hold it? No, I can't, right?
I can't hold the mic.
Hold on. Yes, one more.
Okay, great.
I'll give you one that you can.
Oh, great. We're going to alter this so it'll be easier for you to hear me. So, perfect. Thank you. That's better. So there was a strong age difference. This was the house after a few years later. We added on a porch from that balcony. So you can see here's the original balcony. We added on a porch and a pool below it. And below, that was what the pool looked like. They actually widened the road and took off a bunch of our property, and my parents suddenly had a windfall of money they never had, so they built a pool. And then the architect said, well, the pool's going to fall down the hill into the meadow. So we always worried about that in heavy rainstorms because the meadow flooded. You can see this is the meadow down here, and this was about 2 stories up from the meadow. And it did tilt a couple times, but it never slid down the hill. This was a hill we used to sled down. There's a big tree in the meadow. This becomes important in the UFO story. And here's a stream that runs through here. This is a picture taken right after a rainstorm. And you can see the whole meadow would flood, and sometimes very violently in rainstorms. This was the farmland across the street, and this is the area where I saw the UFO. So you're oriented. So my pictures will make more sense. Let me just take a look at my notes to see if there's anything really important to tell you that I have skipped over. So my view of the upstairs window included a little bit of the pool and this tree in the meadow. I could really see it quite a bit. I could see probably about easily a half a mile out my bedroom window. Now, I basically, since my dad was much older, see what the next picture is, I'll go back a minute. Since my dad was much older, he was sick. He developed emphysema when I was about 13 years old. And my brother was already married and gone, and my sister had gone off to college. So from the time I was about 13 till I graduated from high school, there was a lot of extra responsibility laden on top of me. I gradually became his caretaker while I was in school, and I had a lot of property to maintain. We had 7 acres of ground. I was mowing the lawn with a Gravely lawnmower. I was taking care of the pool. I was painting the house. I was fixing the screens. I became very competent, to say the least, but at times I felt it was an unjust situation for myself. And because my father was ill, he didn't really always know how to express his gratitude. So I left. I was very fortunate to travel in an organization called Up With People. I turned 18, graduated from high school, left, and took off for a year, and I traveled the world. This is a friend of mine from high school. This is my friend right here in Up With People. I don't have really pictures of me, I don't think. This is a picture there. It was a wonderful year, but meanwhile, I returned. Oh, that's the only picture I think I have of me in Up With People in 1973. I returned home, and of course, everything had gone to disrepair. My mother was working full-time, supporting my dad. Their relationship sort of broke apart a little bit. Obviously, she went out to work, having never worked, made more money than my dad, was very successful, became an interior decorator, did sample homes, opened a business, opened a retail store, succeeded in that, opened another division in another store. And my dad's ego was hurt, I think, by this. And I had to take over the job of being mom, right? And I cooked, I was cleaning. When I was 15, when I got my driver's license, my permit, I started driving. Because my father said, you have to go to the grocery store. I said, I don't have a license, I just have a permit. And his response was, well, don't get caught. You know, it sounds funny now, and it is funny, and I kind of laugh at it, but that was a lot of responsibility to lay on a 15-year-old, you know. I was like, well, if I get caught, then I can't get a license. So you can see sort of the sadness in my face here. I returned, and I had tons of work to do to take care of the property, take care of the house. I was got myself into community college. I was working part-time, going to school part-time, and probably working full-time at home. And my dad really had a hard time expressing his gratitude because he was sick. So, and of course nothing I did was right. And I struggled for approval, just like all children do with their parents. And the other thing I was struggling with was the eminent knowledge that my father would die. And I was angry with him. I was angry with him that I wasn't being treated like an adult, but I had huge adult responsibilities. And I really wanted to be present for his death. I remember in the process of this year, I went out and bought Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book, Life After Life, and read it to him after he had a near-death experience. And that's when things started to open up for us. He died and they brought him back to life, and we started to share very deeply. But meanwhile, this period of time I was praying for guidance. And one of the things I was doing is I was journaling. My sister came home from college one day and she said, "This is a really tough situation you're in, and I really can't do anything to help you, but you could be psychologically damaged from this." So she handed me a journal and she said, "Look, you can't afford counseling. Write it down. And maybe in 30 years, if it causes a problem, you can at least go back and see what was going on and you can clear it then, but write it down." And I had read an Edgar Cayce book, and I knew that if I was recording what was going on in my life and also recording what was going on in my dreams, then I could see maybe a little bit about what was going on in my subconscious mind. And it was kind of like a way of self-care. So I took a journal, and in the front part of the book into the middle was what was going on in my normal everyday life. And in the back part of the journal into the middle, everything was dated, were my dreams. So that in one book I could flip back and forth and see I could review current things that were happening, and this was very effective. So I was in the process of heavily journaling and trying to be present, trying to rise above the situation, trying to develop capabilities that I really didn't have as a young 19-year-old, and trying to develop compassion and forgiveness and a sense of being able to be present for my father's imminent passing, which was coming, and also trying to work out the tension that was going on in the home between my parents. And so I want to show you, this is my bedroom window that was up here. This was my room. This was my mother's room by that point, and this was my father's room. He was on oxygen with a large tank. There wasn't portable tanks in that point. We had one upstairs and one downstairs. And I was my dad's caretaker, and my mom was in the middle. My mom was working full-time and really needed her sleep, and my dad needed his privacy too. I went back to the house. Of course, this is a current picture of it, what it looks like today. It's a little clearer picture. And I'm going to walk you up on the balcony. This is the screened-in porch. There were skylights on the screened-in porch. That's looking down the hallway down the balcony towards my room. This little window right here is where I had my sighting. That was a door out of my room, and this is where my mother's room was, right next to me, so that you better understand my drawings. This is the current picture looking out of that window. Down through this foliage, you can see the meadow, but of course when I was there, the foliage was not nearly as high around the pool as you saw from earlier pictures. So this is my drawing of my bedroom window. Hopefully it makes sense to you. This is the balcony right out here. This is my bed, a little nightstand with a journal and a clock, a door that led out to the balcony. In the meadow, a stream that ran through it, and the hillside beyond. I could see a little bit of the pool if I stood up in my bedroom. So there was a big tree in the meadow. As an adult, I can tell you it was about 6 to 7 stories high. It was almost eye level with where my bedroom was. Maybe it was 7 stories high. And it was, the breadth of its branches were almost as wide as the tree was high. So you could draw a big rectangle around this tree. And so I guesstimate that the tree was, 60 to 70 feet high. Now, as I told you, I was writing down my dreams. When I would wake up in the morning, this is what my normal view was, what I could see. Farmland, as you saw from that rainy picture. So I woke up one morning in June in 1975, and I was having a dream. And in the dream, interestingly enough, I remember I was falling from a very, very high place. And I knew that when I hit the ground in my dream, I was going to die. So in the process of the dream state, I hit the ground, but of course I wake up and I'm hitting my bed and my whole body jerks like I've been hit by a bolt of lightning. And I sit up in my bed and I'm trying to process this dream, and I grab the journal and I grab the pen next to my bed, and I'm sitting there trying to make sense of things. It was dawn, it was 5:30 in the morning. I looked at the little clock right next to my bed, and my heart's pounding, and I'm looking out the window, and right over here, I see this rectangle of white light. And it doesn't make sense to me. And I'm still trying to think about the dream. This is me sitting on my bed, and this is what I see. Today, as an adult, I'll tell you, if I took 2 quarters and held them end to end, which you really can't do very well, but if I glued them together, it was about that big at arm's length. The quarters would have blocked it out. It appeared to me to be about a half a mile away, about 1,000 feet in the air. And I thought, well, it's a plane or something, and it's reflecting sunlight, and it'll move, and I'll see what it is. And meanwhile, I've got the page out, and I'm trying to kind of get the pen ready to journal, and I'm trying to recapture the dream. But I keep looking at this light, and I don't know what it is. And finally, I say, okay, like most teenagers, what the H is that, right? And boom, as soon as I ask the question, and as soon as I intuitively have the question, the UFO skips in 3 quick movements, like blip, 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 and it's right outside my bedroom window, right over the big tree. It's very close. It's less than the distance of the back wall of this room. And I'm shocked, totally shocked. I'm like, what? And that moment I get scared. I notice, I have a few sensations that are going on. One is I notice that the rectangle is not lighting up the tree. It's undulating, white, brilliant light. I'm thinking to myself, this is going to blind me. I can't look at it. I have to get up and get out of here. I sense it's looking at me. And I have a brief moment of sensation all over my body where I kind of feel like something is starting, and then it gets faster, 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 and then boom. My thoughts slow down. I feel I want to get up and scream, and I feel like I'm in molasses, or that I'm in a dream state, like I'm trying to open my mouth and nothing's coming out. I'm trying to move my fingers. Those of you who have had paralyzation experiences probably know what I'm talking about. I do remember noticing that the light was not lighting me up or my bedroom. I also remember the sensation of tears falling down my cheeks. I was sitting there crying. That's about all I have conscious memory of. So I was stunned, I couldn't move, I knew it was 5:30 a.m. and this craft was undulating. Then all of a sudden I get this intuition, somewhere, somehow, that the craft is leaving. Like I know it's going to leave. And pretty much at the moment that I get that intuition, it zips off in 3 quick skipping motions to my right. Came in from my left, took off to my right, almost in the same way, but in an opposite triangular trajectory. And it stops at about 45 degrees on the horizon, about 1,000 miles away. I mean, 1,000 miles, 100 feet away, right? I mean, about 1,000 feet in the air on a 45-degree angle, and I look at it, and I have all these questions, like, who, what, where, why? What is this? What just happened? I had questions I wanted answers to, and I was kind of not happy. So I held on to the window frames in my room, watching it, and then it just disappeared. Of course, with no trail. Meanwhile, it's leaving, no sound. It's not wobbling or anything like this. And I see it behind a few clouds. It's as if it backed up out of the sky and just took off and completely disappeared. So I just, run into my mother's room next door, and I wake her up. See, I just go right down the hall. Her room is right next to me. I walk in her room and I say, Mom, did you see this? And I'm pointing, and she was sound asleep. She wakes up, and she's not amused. And she's looking at me like, you're obviously all excited, right? It's early in the morning. She's like, you just don't wake your mother up. And of course I grabbed her legs, which is not a good thing to do. And she had 2 questions basically for me. And the first one was, are you on drugs? Honestly, she looked at me and she said, are you taking drugs? And I was like, really frustrated. I was not taking drugs. I mean, I was a good girl. My God, I had way too much responsibility to do that. I probably should have been taking some drugs. But that was, I didn't have access. So I said no. And then I started to cry because I felt like she was not understanding the seriousness of what I was telling her. And I was crying even more. And then she looked at me and she said, well, why are your pajamas wet? And I looked down and I realized that my shirt is wet, and so are my pants to about my knee level where I had been sitting. So this was pretty damp, pretty wet. And the rest of my pajamas were dry, but that was curious to me. So I go to the bathroom. She's obviously not wanting to have a conversation with me. I go to the bathroom and I go back in my room and I go back to the journal because I know I have to write this down. And I go to the journal and I go to the clock, which is right next to my bed. Now in my mind, the clock is 5:30. It's not light outside. That's still where my mindset is. And I look at the clock and I realize that it's 7 a.m. And I sit back down on the bed, really degenerated. I'm like, wow, how can this be? It's not 7. And because I'm thinking to myself, it was dawn when I saw this thing, but then I'm sitting on the bed and I'm remembering, no, when it took off, it was light, because that was in color, but it was black and white when the craft came in. And then I realized I had this time lapse and I couldn't handle it. So I have what I call a rubber band snapping in my head, where you cannot make sense of reality. And I laid back down on my bed and I just needed to cuddle myself. I needed to kind of just lay in a fetal position. And I thought if I laid there for a few minutes, I could gain the composure I needed to write the story down. And all the energy I had drained out of me. I think fear started to come over me about what actually happened. And I fell back to sleep within a few moments because I was completely exhausted. And I got back up at about 10:30 in the morning. But the journal was right there next to my bed, and so was the clock, so I wrote it all down in my journal. And basically what I wrote down was the whole story. I had a bit of the dream sequence going on where I'm falling from a high place, I hit my bed, I wake up, I'm trying to write the dream down, and then I see this UFO. I write that down. Then I write down that I go into my mother's room and I talk to her. And as I said, I was in the process where I was reading my journal. Had I not been journaling, I may not be standing here talking to you today, because this whole thing could have very easily slipped from my awareness and I may not have paid attention to it. But I'm reading the journal about 3 weeks later and I see that I went and I talked to my mother, right? So I thought, well, all right, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. So I walked downstairs and I said, Mom, about 3 weeks ago, did I come in and ask you in the middle of the morning if you saw a UFO? And she was still angry about it. And she was like, yes, you did. And I was like, all right. So I said, that's all I want to know. I went back upstairs and I wrote, okay, my mother confirms I had the conversation with her. What does that prove? It proved that that part was probably not a dream, that my mother knew I came and talked to her. But I didn't know about the sighting. And I just wrote right there and then, well, this is going to remain in my gray box. And basically, it did for a very, very long time. Except I took an interest in the topic. And I, would pick up books. I read Eric von Daniken's book, and, I tried to read a little bit about UFOs. There wasn't a lot in the 70s on the topic, except, a few good authors were out there, but not too many. One of the books I picked up was I started to read about Zach Sitchin, and Zach started to have training seminars. So I went to one in Chicago in 1999. And while I was there, Zach was saying something about me and honoring me. I just happened to have this picture. So while I was there, I met this man named Christopher Timms. And Christopher Timms did tuning fork work, where he would take tuning forks and sort of paint them over your body, and then he would actually put the tuning fork right on parts of your body and let the sound vibration penetrate in. And it was a way to relax the central nervous system. He had studied with Tibetan monks who used tuning bowls to do the same thing, and he thought, well, I can go back to the States and do this with tuning forks, because I can't travel around with all these tuning bowls, but I can take a pack of tuning forks. So he offered for a friend of mine and me to come up to his room with a couple of other people and have a session. So I did. I went up, I laid down on a hotel bed just like we're here, and he's doing tuning fork work on me, and I'm just relaxing and my eyes are closed. And he picks up a tuning fork, I think it was a C or something. He had hockey pucks, he hits it on, and he put the tuning fork right on my heart chakra, literally right on the chest bone, and many other places. But when he started at my feet, and as he was working up and he got here, as soon as he put the tuning fork on my chest bone, boom, the whole UFO memory is right there, smack in my memory. And I start to cry, and I want to get up off the bed, and I'm upset, and like my heart starts pounding. And Chris sees what's going on. He drops the tuning fork, he puts one hand on my stomach, right, one on my forehead. He said, whoa, 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 whoa. This is a memory that's being triggered by the sound. Just relax, it's not happening. This is a memory, it's not happening, you're safe. And then he finished the tuning fork work. Now, I said nothing to him. I'm just weeping like I was when I saw the UFO. But I didn't understand why. I didn't know if it was fear. I mean, I was frightened by this crap, but I didn't know what was going on. And after the tuning fork work, basically, Chris sat down on the bed next to me, and he said, so tell me about the UFO. I said, what? Why did you say that? And he said, I don't know, just while you were reacting, I had this flash of light in my head, and I saw like what looked to him like a cylinder of brilliant white light that was very, very close to me and interacting with me. And he said, it appeared to me that maybe like, I think you were in your bedroom and you saw this light outside your room. And I was like, wow. That's really interesting. So I thought, okay, this is synchronistic. I need to pay attention to this. So I invited Chris to Philadelphia. This is in my home. These are some of my dearest goddess girlfriends. And we all learned tuning fork work, and I did tuning fork work. I've also studied Reiki and a number of other things. And so, that was just an interesting event. And I kept thinking, I need to start to unpack this more. I need to unpack this more. And I need to prepare myself to unpack this story. I didn't really know who to go to a regression therapist. Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs were chomping at the bit for me. They were, Jen, you got missing time. Oh, you've got an abduction. And they were just like right on me. You got to come do a regression. It didn't feel right to me. And I said, at the right time, I will know. I'll do it when I'm ready. I was just kind of I had an inner guidance about that. I forgot to mention one important thing, and I apologize. It's the first time I've spoken about this whole event, but it is important to my story. And I'm just going to backtrack for a minute because I'm remembering. So give me a second. I'm just going to zip right back to this slide. Oh, no. I'm sorry. I'm not behind myself. Forgive me. I'm just not reading my presentation, so I'm trying to speak it to you rather than read it. So this is a total different jump in the story. Okay, I learned tuning fork work, but I don't know where that all is going to lead me. And my husband and I decide that we're going to get our PADI certifications for scuba diving. And he has to go to Japan on a business trip, and he says to me, Jen, why don't we go to Hawaii? And we can get our certification there in Hawaii, and you can stay on. I know you have a really dear friend in Hawaii, which I did, a friend who traveled and up with people with me. So we did. We went to Hawaii in 2001. That's my husband, Michael, and this is us getting our PADI certification. My husband goes off to Japan, and I go to visit one of my dear friends named John Trevitt, who traveled in Up With People with me. This is John right here. And we haven't gotten much time to see each other over the years, but we were really dear friends. This is him and I again. We were very good friends when we were in Up With People. He wanted me to go to Europe with him. He wanted me to save a bunch of money and go to Europe and travel, and I couldn't. I had way too much responsibility on my hands. I was making plenty of money. I was working and everything just like he was, but I had to paint the house, mow the lawn, care for my dad. So he went off to Europe and I did not, and then he came and visited me after that period of time. This is John as well, here in Upper People. And this is John and I, just to give you a sense of him. So I go to visit John in Hawaii, right? I haven't seen him in a long time, probably about 10 years. He had visited me a few years earlier because his daughter needed medical care at University of Pennsylvania, and I helped him. I sent him money and flew his daughter in to stay with us and while he got medical care for his daughter. In fact, this picture was taken during that time when he was staying with me in Philadelphia, about maybe 8 years before. And while we were there at his apartment, we're cooking dinner, we're visiting, we're having a good time, we're laughing about old times. I'm holding a glass of wine. And he turns to me, he says, Jen, he says, I've been thinking about something I need to ask you. I said, okay. He said, what happened when we had that UFO experience? And I dropped my wine glass, smattered it all over the floor. I took about 4 steps back. I said, John, I remember a me part of a UFO story, but I do not remember the we part. I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, whoa, don't even say anything. I said, you're freaking me out, obviously, because I just dropped my wine glass and I'm shaking and I'm about to cry. I said, you get a piece of paper and you go out in the backyard and you write it down. And I'll go out in the front yard and I'll write mine down. And then we'll sit here and we'll read each other's stories, because I don't like messing with my memory. I don't like messing with my psyche. So that's exactly what we did. He went out in the backyard, he wrote down his story, I wrote down mine. This is John's kitchen, and that's the only picture I had of this trip. This picture was actually taken 8 years before, when he came to stay with me when his daughter was ill, and he's sitting in my office. Of course, we never talked about this event then. We never talked about it ever. And basically, he had the same story I had. What I discovered is that John was visiting me at the time of the UFO event, and he was asleep on the porch right here, and I was up here. Somehow, in his mind, he saw that we were both having the same event. I had no perception of John. Now, John's perceptions were slightly different in that he remembered jolting awake, and he opened his eyes, and there was a freaking craft. He saw it as a craft, but also brilliant white light sitting above the big tree in the meadow. He thought it was only a few moments, and then it took off. He also recounted in his story that he was not going to move. He thought, just sort of like a muskrat, if you don't move, it won't see you. So he laid as perfectly still as he could in his sleeping bag. He said and then it took off, and he felt he was safe, and he went back to sleep. Now, had I not been journaling, right, I might not have known that there was this time issue that happened. So this is just to walk you through. He had a sense of me. This is the vantage point, He was asleep here, I was asleep up here. We both saw this craft. Now this is the porch that he was asleep on. Of course, different furniture. This is the woman who lives there now. So we both had the same view. He was down here, I was in an upper bedroom looking out towards this meadow, which is now completely overgrown. So on the flight home from Hawaii, I thought to myself, my God, it's taken me practically 30 years to know that this really happened. So what does that mean now? How do I unpack my gray box? If I do, what will it mean? Am I going to be the victim of a lot of ridicule? Am I courageous enough to go get a regression? Is this going to break up my marriage? I mean, all sorts of questions like this arose. And I decided that I definitely needed to unpack this, but I needed a community to do it in. So I started. I had just traveled the year before to crop circles for the first time with a MUFON representative, Ruben Uriarte, and from Northern California. And Ruben was trying to convince me at that point to start a MUFON group because we didn't have one in the area. So I said, okay, all right, I'll start a MUFON group. So I did. And this is a moment where I can plug MUFON Pennsylvania is having a conference October 4th and 5th. So if you'd like to come, please pick up a flyer. The other thing I started to do is not only do annual conferences, but once a month at my local library, I do a program. And I bring a speaker in, or I present, or I get a film. And now I get about 50, 60 people that show up on a regular basis. A number of speakers in the room have come to Philadelphia and spoken. And it has created a wonderful community for me to help other people and for me to develop and get an education about this topic. And it's really been, I have not regretted the step forward that I made. And I do it cautiously, and I do it respectfully. So one of the conferences I went to, at the Ozarks UFO conference, Linda Howe, who's a dear friend, was telling me for years and years, you gotta come to this conference, you gotta come. So finally my good friend Grace Schuler and I went. And while we were there, we always meet people we know. You probably recognize Steve Bassett here, and these are just some other UFO friends. This man is Joe Lewells. He was the head of MUFON in Texas for a while, and he was part of, he wrote a book called The God Hypothesis, and he got very much involved in doing regressions. I don't believe he's doing them as much now, but he was for quite a while. Kathy probably knows Joe Lewells. Very, very nice man. So I became, we went out to dinner, we were talking, and I became very comfortable with Joe, and Joe said, Jen, it's time you do a regression, and I'm here, let's do it while we're here at the conference. So I went back to my hotel room, got my dowsing rods out, I'm not supposed to do this. I got the little ka-ching for me, which is a yes, when the rods come in and touch synchronistically and make a little ding noise. I went, okay, I guess I'm supposed to do this. So Joe, in our hotel room, laid me down on a bed, got out his tape recorder, and started to regress me back. And he took me back to this event where I was seeing the UFO, I had sat up, and it moved very, very close to me, because obviously whatever was going on happened there. And I was having a little bit of difficulty getting beyond or getting any more information besides sitting there feeling paralyzed, crying, seeing this craft, being a little bit afraid. And finally Joe, with his gentle suggestion, said, well, Jen, when the craft left, you had a lot of questions. Who are you? Where did you come from? What was this? What just happened? He said, ask some of those questions, or see if you can move into the light. He kind of gently gave me a suggestion or a guidance. Some people have said, when I've recounted my suggestion, well, a good regression therapist never leads you. I don't know. This was my only regression that I really ever had. And as soon as he suggested that, I was very easily able to move into the light or the craft. The first few impressions I had was that it was a much, much, much larger space that I had moved into than what could possibly be contained above my big tree in the meadow. Almost like a matrix type of thing, and almost like a huge type of complex, like a apartment complex building, or even like a skyscraper with many, many stories up and many, many stories down, and lights and things going back and forth. It was very confusing to me. And then all of a sudden, these orbs came, one by one, boom, 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 and they surrounded me in this regression. And I was like, wow, I'm being visited by these lights, and I don't know what they are. I didn't know if they were a barrier to prevent me from going any further, or they were like a greeting committee of some sort. And I was standing there, I felt very calm with these lights around me, and Joe said, well, look at each one. Start to look at each one. And as I turned and looked into each of the orbs, I experienced something that I have rarely ever experienced in my life, occasionally in dream states. and occasionally I've been lucky enough to do this, but a sense of huge, profound love, and as if I was finally seeing someone that I knew in another lifetime, or I had had a significant relationship with, like a child or a parent or a grandparent or a teacher, and I hadn't seen them for a very, 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 very long time, and I was reuniting with them, and it made me weep. I was just weeping while I'm having the regression. I'm lying on the bed and I can hardly talk to Joe, who's trying to record this, and I'm like, I'm just a basket case. And he said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Oh, it's wonderful. I'm fine. I'm seeing these beings that I've known from a different dimension or another time." That's all I could explain to Joe. So what was flooding over me was a huge sense of love, of respect, and acknowledgement from these light beings. Now, think back about what was going on in my life at the time when I had this regression. I wasn't being appreciated. My dad was sick. He didn't have the capacity to appreciate. He only had the capacity to need. And I was seeking to develop the capacity to not be angry, to do forgiveness work, and to be present for him at his death, which was imminent and was coming, and I was really looking for support. I mean, I was going to an ashram. I was getting lots of support where I could. I went out and studied TM, and I was meditating. But still, there wasn't an adult around me that could really fully appreciate what I was going through. So maybe there is a link between what happened to me and what I was going through. I don't really know. But when I'm left to kind of boil this all down in my life, I know that sometimes sensations, when you're dealing with UFO experiences, are very, very hard to trust, because people have been, recount experiences where their sensations are distorted, and their sense of smell and taste and things like that. But I think it's very interesting that things like our sense of smell and touch and even visual things is where our memories are buried. So we're kind of caught in this catch-22. And I've had to boil this event down to the basic bottom of my heart, saying, what was the overall feeling and sensation? And is this something I can rely on? And can I prove to you that this is exactly what happened? Or did I imagine this in a regression? No, I can't prove it. I can't prove that it actually happened. But this is what happened this is what I saw when I did a regression with Joe. So I feel that something profound happened, because it ended up changing my life, making me very interested in this, starting a UFO group and things like that. And especially when I knew that I really did see this craft. So I have a few more things before I close. I know that the power of light is always used as a catalyst in all forms of science. I mean, even sunlight alone hitting the earth forces seeds to open. Maybe light has an effect on a spiritual level as well, that it acts as a catalyst of change. Certainly for me, I think that the long-range impact was that my life changed dramatically after I saw the UFO. Within a year, I moved out of the house. After I got my parents back to where they had been before I took off work for other people, then I said, look, I'm a young person. I have a life ahead of me. You have issues you need to deal with. You're not. I can't deal with those issues. I'm moving out. When you need help, call me and I'll come back and help. And I did. I got an apartment. I was enrolled in school. And my parents were much more appreciative of me. And I was able to help my father very profoundly as well. And he began to more appreciate me more. So I think, that I grew new skills, new emotional capabilities, and possibly even prevented a lifelong wound. If we carry around wounds, they tend to get re-wounded as we get older in our life. Maybe this was a healing of a deep emotional wound, because I was able to get very close with my dad. So within a year of seeing this UFO, my father passed. And at the day when he passed, I was working at a department store selling cosmetics. And I'm waiting on a customer, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see this light orb start to float across the department store. And I'm like, oh my, and I know it's my father. And I'm like, oh, I'm trying to make the sale, and I'm looking at this light, and I'm thinking, oh, this is like really weird. It actually floats right up to me. My father sits on my shoulders. He wraps his legs around me like a yogic wrap. He puts his hands, I mean, I'm sensing all this in my sixth sense. He puts his hands on my chin, and he starts to pull my head up, and he's hollering down into my crown chakra, Jennifer! And I'm like, okay, Dad, like I'm dealing with two dimensions here. I get it. I said, I'll close the store, I'll close the register here, I'll come to the hospital, just give me a minute. I sell this woman her cream, I lock my register, I call the store manager of the department store, and I say, look, I know you're just going to think I'm nuts, but that's all right, I'm just going to come right out with it. I said, I'm pretty sure my dad just passed. He's dying and he's in the hospital, and I'm going to go to the hospital. I'm locking my register, I'm giving the key to the girl next door, I'm not coming down and clocking out. I want you to do that for me. He said, you have to do this for me. I said, I'm leaving. And I said, if I don't come back, he has died. And I have 3 days bereavement if he's gone. And I have a 2-week vacation that starts Saturday. So you may not see me for a week and a half, or well, 2.5 weeks. I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm sure he thought I was giving him a line of bull, and then I just wanted to leave the store, but it wasn't true. I got to the hospital, and my dad was gone. But this is the interesting part. He was in a room with 3 other people. This was, of course, 1977 at this point. It was 1977, early in 1977, and he was not in intensive care at this point when he was in the hospital. And I think the people in the room thought he had been snoring. A lot of times they say when people die, they kind of go through a death rattle. Well, when I walked up and I looked at him, his eyes were faced out the window. The other people couldn't see him, but only the whites of his eyes were showing. His eyes had rolled back. He had gagged on his tongue. His body was sort of all, convoluted. And I think the other people thought he finally fell asleep. And I recognized what was going on immediately, and I said, hi, Dad, and I pulled the curtain around, and I was talking to him to calm the other people down in the room. I straightened his eyes, closed his eyes, straightened his mouth. His body was still warm. I could still do that. And I just sat down with him, and I said, okay, Dad. I said, I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner. I know you came to tell me to come, and I'm here, and what do you want to tell me? I'm here, right? So he said to me, Jen, he said, I went to everybody in the family, but you're the only one that came. And suddenly there was things that he told me that he wasn't able to tell me while he was alive. And I could have made it all up in my head, you might think I did. But he was telling me stuff I had no idea of, safety deposit box stuff about his former wife, stuff I had to do for my mother. He told me I was the one who was going to have to take care of my mother and my sister in my life. And as it turns out, I really have quite a bit. I've been a good caretaker to them, I think. My mother passed about 2 years ago now. And I was the caretaker for her at the end of her life. And long story short, lots of touching communication happens, and then the nurse comes in, right? And she pulls the curtain back and she goes, she realizes he's dead. And she runs for the phone and she's all upset. And I said, please leave this man in peace. He's been gone 45 minutes. Leave us in peace. Well, in that moment, the 3 other people in the room realized he was dead. I don't know if any of you are psychic or intuitive, but oh my God, the static electric energy in the room filled up immediately. It was about 2 inches from the ceiling, right? No communication was happening with my father and I, and all I could pick up was the uncomfortableness of the 3 other people in the room. Like, what's she been doing with him in there? And so I thought, okay, time to go talk to the family. So I walk out, and this is long before cell phones. I go to the nurse's station, and they offer me their phone. I call my sister, who lives about 3 blocks away, who has a business. My sister, my mother, and I all designed and produced clothing and sold it together in a business called Mud and Muslin. And we made these gunny sack, lacy dresses and things like that. And her husband made pottery, so hence it was called Mud and Muslin. So when my sister would answer the phone, she would say, Mud and Muslin, you know. So the phone rings, she picks it up, and she says, he's gone, isn't he? I said, yes, he's gone. And then she said, I know, he was here. Now, one of the things my father said to me is, I went to everybody else in the family, and nobody else came. The other thing my father said to me is, you have a gift, Jen, and I didn't recognize it. And I always thought you were nuts and crazy. But he said, I want to tell you from this perspective, and from my perspective now, passed over, you're not. This is a gift. You can use it in your life. It will serve you well. Follow your intuition. Don't let anyone take it away from you. And don't forget this happened. He kept saying that to me. Don't forget this happened. Well, I forgot moments, right? I walked out, I called my sister, and then my sister says to me, I know, he was here. And suddenly I went, oh, it's like my father saying to me, don't forget, don't forget. So that profoundly affected me. And maybe had I not had this orb experience, I would have never known or paid attention or even seen the light orb flying across the room. Now this is what's interesting. I never spoke about this before. I never put this PowerPoint together. I didn't have the regression with Joe Lewell's for 30 years after my dad died, almost 35. I never even put 2 and 2 together that possibly there was a connection between these light orbs and my father dying. So this is the light bulb going off in my head, right, from doing this presentation. Maybe, you know, I've been studying, I host a lot of conferences and do work and bring speakers in from noetic sciences as well. And I've been very friendly with Edgar Mitchell for many, many years because he came to my Up With People group and spoke to us and told us he was going to form noetic sciences. So I've been a member of noetic sciences for like 30 years and got their journals and read their books and things. And I'm very impressed with Dean Radin's work and what he talks about entangled minds. He's done research where 2 psychic people working together, even thousands of miles apart, will be communicating, and when they are, their brains light up. And they can see this, even in shielded rooms, the same parts of their brains light up. So maybe there's some connection with light that we don't really fully understand yet. So I'm going to close my presentation with one more little interesting anecdote. As you know, I went back to the house to take pictures, and the owner, of course, was very happy. She let me come in the house, which I had never done before. When my mom died, we went to the house, and we actually put some of her ashes in the meadow. We had a picnic, and we put her ashes around the house, because my mother loved this house, too. And so while I was there visiting her, I said to the owner, you know, this is why I'm here. I'm doing this UFO presentation, and I had a major sighting while I was here at the house when I was 19. Have you ever seen anything? You know, just out of curiosity. And she said, well, I haven't. But she said the year after I bought this house, so that would have been 1977. She bought it in 76. My dad died in 77. She said in 1977, this guy flew in the driveway one day in a car, jumped out of the car, ran up, banged on the door, and said, can I run back in your field? I'm driving down the road here, and a big disc, a big UFO just landed back here on the backside of your property. And she said, sure, you know, go on off, run off and find it. And he actually got in his car and took another entrance through a farmer's field she told him to take. So maybe there's something more I need to look at this property and things that are going on. But this is where I'm going to close. This is where I am in my journey, and it's been a humbling process to share it with you, and maybe in some way it's affected you and reached you. Thank you.